Welcome, everyone, to the Workforce Navigator podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very interesting and maybe an even unexpected conversation. We're talking with Doug Innocenti here. And Doug, you're the CISO at MoonPay. And I'm going to ask you to maybe tell us a little bit more about your background in just a minute here. But we're going to talk today about how to cultivate great relationship with your HR leaders. And why, from a CISO's point of view, why that's even important. And we know it is, but you're going to take it and you're going to unpack that in a number of different ways. We were just talking, and it makes really good sense. You were very passionate about this conversation. And going back to your roots, working in contact centers or with contact centers and taking care of customers and thinking about their well-being, their emotional well-being, and how we do that internally with our employees and create high performance teams, and how HR leaders are a huge partner in that. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. But what I'd love to do is I'd love to just throw it over to you for a minute and explain a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Thanks, Steve. Like you said, I'm Doug Innocenti. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for MoonPay. Goodness, where we've been talking about it for so long now. My background is probably unique if you thought about the crypto world and kind of where things are ending up. Started off in the traditional financial world. I worked a little over 27 years for the combined Wells Fargo. I had a number of roles there. It was probably one of my largest learning events that I had. Touched a lot of different fields. Like you said, one of the bigger areas that I ran was a lot of the contact center engineering space, which is an interesting transition to where I am today. Left there about 6-7 years ago, moved over to a great startup here in the Bay Area, Trip Actions, Navan. Learned a great deal there, then moved on to here. I've been at MoonPay for over almost 4 years now, where I've owned the IT and security world, and obviously been in the CISO role for the last 2.
Fantastic. Well, here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to start out kind of right dead center where we were talking about. I'd like to understand why you feel like this balance between individuals and their growth, their opportunities within an organization, and how that directly balances and impacts business needs, and why you feel that's so important.
You know, especially in a hyper growth company like we're at and what we're doing at MoonPay, the ability to sustain the business, especially when you're IT and security, the group is an enabler. Our job is to make sure both to protect the company and enable the company to move it forward. It's an interesting balance. Like you said, you want to cultivate your team. You want your team to grow, and it's important for them to grow. You can give them every project we have going on. You can continue to give them growth, but you want them to have individual growth. It's understanding both of those at the time. You can mix the two together, I think, really well, but there is a need to ensure that the pace that we're trying to get in the hyper growth we're in, individuals need the ability to go do that. And it's important in my seat to ensure that they can do that, whether it's getting them training, giving them online training, sending the training, but at the same time, stretching them to take on another project maybe they haven't done, because there is learning that's in place that comes from that, that's important for them to continue to grow. So balancing those two on a daily basis is very important, and helping them see the path that's going to be there, I think, is even more important, that you can explain to them what you see you want them to do and how they want to grow, and taking in their feedback, but also just really enabling them through either good project development or personal development across the board.
You know, it's interesting. We had a gentleman on this podcast. He's a PhD. He's a chief people officer, does his dissertation on proving a lot of what you're talking about here, that if we focus on our employees and employee engagement, that directly turns into customer engagement and directly into revenue for the business. So he actually proved it. It's intuitive that that happens, but it was rare that we actually proved it. You talked previously about that there's a challenge in doing this, balancing personal development goals and organizational objectives. That doesn't just happen, right? There's a lot of challenges to do that. Tell us a little bit about these challenges and maybe how you think about getting over them.
You know, when you look at it from a workload perspective, I think that's one of the biggest things everyone looks at. You have deliverables that are very important for the company. Everybody has them, whether they're built into your OKRs or they're projects that you're sustaining inside your group, they're there. It's not always visible, I think, sometimes for people to see the path to the project, enabling one project, which enables another project, which enables another project. So the first one is understanding, cultivating the vision that you want. especially when you sit in my seat where you're responsible for not only the technological path that we were going to do from an IT, but also looking at the security path at the same time. They can be in conflict to one another, and that can also be challenged by what the business wants to do. And I've tried to continue this with my team and continue to talk about it is the job is, if we're doing security right, we're an enabler for the business. We should not be a blocker for the business. That's not always easy to see from an individual perspective. Sometimes security and projects can be seen as roadblocks, but if you build them the right way and structure them the right way and explain it, it helps your team understand where they're doing and what they're delivering for the company. Security, I believe, is an asset. If you have a strongly secure background and the company secure, it enables your trust with your customers, and that enables things to move faster, move forward quicker. But individual work, when you're thinking about your team and people who work for me, talking about those things, I do believe what needs to happen more is talking about it. I can write hundreds of decks and hand them over the edge, but I do believe talking to your people, explaining it to them, listening to the questions, sometimes having those tough conversations about why we're going to go right versus going left, or adding it when we have to add technical debt to the environment because we're going to enable the business is important. So the biggest thing that I would take away from it is when you need to talk to your team, you need to share with them the vision, maybe break down the vision that's at the top of the house and bring it forward so that way you can cultivate what that individual delivery is going to be. So I have probably learned in my past that one of the best things you can do is talk to your team. It needs to be bi-directional. It needs to be real time. And even in the virtual world we live in today, you need to talk to your people on a daily basis. It has to happen.
One of the things you said right in the middle of that was you gave an analogy of, as a CISO, security really helps develop trust from your company with your client base. And what you're talking about right now is developing trust with your own team, with the individual members, and bringing them in and understanding. And you used a term before, I think it was like psychological safety, like giving them the ability to feel safe in what they're doing, what the big vision is, but their role in that too. This idea of psychological safety, like, what does that mean to you?
It's a really big point. And you're right. We talked about it. It is not always seen, especially if you're a group like an IT and security, where you're in the background, you're not at that forefront of product development or any of the teams that are actually selling the product or moving it forward with partners, but you're enabling them. So it can feel difficult that you're getting handed things to do, you're making sure things are going to get done. They're not always in the forefront of visibility, but that's what I'm saying, that you have to cultivate the vision and help them understand where it's coming, help them see where it is, promote them when they're doing great, give them feedback when they need to get better. But all of it should be done in a world where you help them understand what their role is and how it's helping the greater good of the company to grow. Again, it's not always front and center where you see it, especially in the seat for IT and security. But like I said, it's constant conversations. It's breaking it down sometimes to understand what that looks like and how it's going to look. But in one shape or form, it is my seat and the managers underneath me. And I would say what we need to do is to get employee to engage and be moving things at a speed of light if we have to, or doing the right thing at different times, is really empowering them with knowledge and empowering them with the trust that they know that we're going to be there to back them up no matter what it's going to be. So it's an important thing. It's a bi-directional feeling between you and your employee to know that feeling of camaraderie, and also that understanding that if you're going to be there, I'm going to be there at the same time. So you don't have to worry.
I got your back. That's like a way to sum that up. I love that. It's interesting because we're talking about existing employees right now, but there is a flow, a talent acquisition flow that comes into every business. And if we don't think strategically about that flow, and we don't think about the culture, really, which is what you're talking about in creating here, and the fit into that culture, as much as the requirements, specific technical or whatever requirements on that talent acquisition that you're talking with your HR partner with. Tell me a little bit about the strategic role of talent acquisition. And you coined a term which I thought was really great, is they said our HR partners are strategic partners with us. Why did you say that? And not that any of us are going to disagree, but it's a big point.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I mean, if you look at both your HR and your talent team, the partnership between IT security and the HR team is pivotal. There's a synergy between the two, especially for various different reasons that are built into it. Talent team is important, and it's not just your own team, but I think looking beyond the team that you have into the rest of the organization, understanding how we are acquiring talent, how we're screening that talent, or even how we're bringing talent in to understand what that's going to look like. I know you and I spoke about it last time we spoke, but one of the areas I think that's unique about it when I say strategic is also understanding that even for myself, when I look at hiring, like we talked about, if you were to poll anybody who would think I'd be in the seat now compared to where I started with working in telephony and a lot of the areas that I grew up into this just by what I touched over the years, it's not always obvious, I think, when you're looking at talent. And this is one of the things that I cultivate with talent is it's not sometimes always visible that the person you're going to hire is there. There is that area where you can see the talent beyond what's on the resume. And we talked about this before. So having a strategic partnership with your talent team and understanding that where your hiring objectives are going to be, but also the style and the candidacy you're looking for beyond the resume, beyond the job description. There are things that you can see, as, especially in my seat, and I believe that having that partnership with your talent and your HR team helps you cultivate how you're going to bring the talent into the organization and also bring in the talent that you know is going to better the greater good of the group, meaning that you find somebody that's that mix of both knowledge and energy that's going to help you raise the bar for the organization. So I think it's a very interesting partnership that has to be there because is it the hiring manager, it's one thing, but to have them help go find that talent, to find that unique diamond in the rough that's out there that you're wanting to bring into the group is very important.
So it's interesting. I hear you talk about this, and I talk to a lot of HR professionals on this podcast. Almost unilaterally, they feel not like a strategic partner. They feel like a support department. They feel like they don't have a seat at the table with the CISO, the C suite, the other departments. What would you say to an HR professional about their level of importance to creating that team and accomplishing the goals, not only on your team, but corporately?
Not sure I would be able to tell them how to do it, but if I was sitting in my seat as a CISO or even as another manager and looking at your talent team, I would probably look at it saying that myself as a hiring manager or otherwise, you need to cultivate that relationship. It cannot be something that you drop in when you need the open rec or you need to hire. If they don't know what your group stands for or how your team operates or the mantra through which your team does day to day, when the time comes that you need to go get a strategic hire or do a backfill or elevate your team to grow, you don't want to start at day one with them of understanding, I'm Doug, who are you? And you're trying to have that conversation. So it needs to be cultivated up front. It's got to be something that's, even when you don't have the open rec, you cultivate that relationship and that understanding just as much as you should understand their processes of how they do talent acquisition, how we do hiring, what job descriptions. I'm sure every talent development team has a series of processes, but just as much as you should know theirs, it's the hiring manager's job to make sure that you're continuing explaining who you are, how you operate, what your team believes in, how your team is structured. So I think the miss in sometimes is that not cultivating that relationship with the HR and the talent team proactively can lead to issues where the team is not able to support you well. And I do believe it's bi-directional on that level. So you need to take that proactive step to do that versus being waiting for that last minute to go work with them on that one critical hire you need to get done. Because if that happens, the talent's not going to be found in the way you're looking for it because you're having to both explain yourself and look for that proper hire all at the same time.
It's interesting because there's like the do's and don'ts of how to come in your experience. What are the things that if you were to recommend to HR professionals that are watching this right now, don't do this. Here's what we want you to do. Like I was at a conference and the speaker got up and they said, I know a lot of you want to come talk to us speakers afterwards. Don't do that. Tell your clients to recommend us in and don't just barrage us with, hey, I'm the sales rep for your territory. I'd like to talk. Like he laid out the do's and the don'ts. Like what would be some do's and don'ts?
What I would probably give to them, and I know it's easier probably looking for myself outward to it. So I don't know if how I'd tell them exactly how to do it, but if I was sitting with people who are in my seat or other managers who are working with their talent team is one, making sure that you can clearly articulate the vision for what your team is doing. I think the second part is making sure that you can also explain to them how your team operates, and not your traditional, here's my org chart, here's what my team does, but really understanding how your team operates from flow perspective, understanding the synergies of how your team operates, or whether it's a 2-member team or a 30-person team, really helping them understand the flow, help them understand better how to do it. And I think the last one is help them understand who you are, explaining how you look to do hiring, explain the idiosyncrasies of how you look at talent, I think is important. All of those things need to be cultivated up front. So I think really sitting from my seat in, not so much me trying to tell the talent team how to do things. I wouldn't want them the same way to tell me how to run it. But if I was looking at my seat, talking inward and looking at the talent team, I think those would be the 3 big areas that if I was telling other managers or even hiring managers looking into them, is really take those steps in to make sure that you are cultivating the vision inward to them, be proactive in it, being able to articulate it, then also make sure it's something that they can see, not just read on a piece of paper, that they see it in day to day. So it's important in some way, shape, or form. And it needs to be cultivated on a lot of different levels. But I think those 3 areas would probably be the really big things to do.
I love that. You got to sell a little bit, right? You're talking to an audience that you want to have a strategic relationship with. So you're not just going to take a rec and post it and then run AI on all the resumes that come in. You do far beyond that. But if you know that as the HR professional, but if you're not sharing what you do to go beyond and really understand you and your role and needs of your team and how you match that up, one of the things that I think is important as a part of that, and it's right to what you started this whole conversation out about, is that how we treat our employees in that culture is a magnet for talent. In fact, just a couple of months ago, I had another CISO on this podcast, and she said, one of the first things that I look at, and I kick companies off of my list if I don't feel like they have the right culture that I would fit into. So it's an attraction, like what you're talking about and how we treat our employees and the culture that we create is a huge part of the strategy of bringing that high performance player in teams. You mentioned this as it's not a transactional relationship. You say it's not about, I got a rec, let's go fill it. It's a symbiotic relationship. What did you mean by that?
When I think about this from what you said, that it's more symbiotic than more that there's a tie between the two. And I would say also from my seat, and like you said before, sometimes talent teams are looked at as a services organization, that they're delivering a service, and not so much fortunate, IT and security are looked at the same way. So there's a lot of mutual feeling of how those things work together. So like I said, it has to be based on relationship. And you touched on it a moment ago, and I agree with the previous CISO that you spoke of, that you do business with them not just because of their great talent and their great tech, but the culture of the company that's going to be there. Those vendors will be there all the time, but when it's at the worst or you need them at that most important time, that they're there. That's the same thing, I believe, when you talk about symbiotic relationship with other partner teams in your organization, especially the talent team. You need to have that understanding that when you need them, they're there for you. You don't want to have to cultivate it in the moment that you need to do it. One of the best partner teams we have is with our HR team. We have our talent team and even our finance team, but you build those relationships and they become a part of the group, and you understand what they do and you operate in that way. So cultivating the relationship and cultivating the engagement with them together so that you can work on those things is important. Having the conversations, building the right rapport with them, and then working with them to understand how to operationalize that and work together on it is very important. So it cannot be transactional. It can't be like you're dropping a rec on the desk, give me a person back. It really needs to be engaged in a way that it really cultivates what is the spirit of what the company wants and what your team wants, and they understand you. So it cannot be transactional.
So, in order to create a symbiotic relationship, and I asked you, the previous question was, what can an HR professional do from their point of view to help build that relationship? Now I want to flip that around. What's the responsibility of the C-suite? You sit in the C-suite. What's your responsibility in making sure that that is a symbiotic relationship? There is a strategic partnership there.
For myself, it's really pushing it downward into my team, really like doing what I can to help my team. And what I mean by that is just as I would want myself to operate with it, is cultivating that culture down into your team, and so that they resonate the same way outward the same way. So when I look at it, is I set the tone for my team, and I set the tone of what I want the team to be. That tone from the top down into the team lets you establish how your team is going to operate. If you have a negative tone for the day, the team can resonate to that same tone. So if you resonate to the area that you want to understand that we're going to build these relationships here, we're going to build the relationships here, and so on, it is important to understand that when I look at my team and we work together on things, that the message that I want them to carry forward carries forward in a way that we all speak with that same voice, that culture stays together and that culture stays linked to what you believe in as far as how you're going to operate. So the biggest thing I would say is that you take the responsibility and you set the tone within your team. So from my seat, if I set a negative tone for the day for whatever it might be, it's going to go down. I own that responsibility. If I set a positive one, it's the same thing. If I set the speed, it's the same one. So if I am wanting to have that relationship with those groups, you want to understand your responsibility of what you're doing to your team and how you're doing it. So you have to reflect on a daily basis of how you feel and how you believe is going to reflect inward to your team at all times. So even when things are tight or running strong, to even if you have to push to get something done, it's to be that we're going to figure this out. It has to be there to do it. So it's an important role. So I think it's not easy to do, especially when things are hitting the wall, but it's a role that you have to understand that your tone sets the disposition of where the team goes.
Setting that tone, creating that relationship, we all have more than we can do in a day, right? We all are trying to get things off of our list. And so building that relationship, you talked about it, it's not like a project that comes to completion. Oh, I built that relationship. You talked about it as a continuous process. So it's something we always have to be working on. And we don't like taking more on that we always have to work on. We got enough of that, right? But why is this something that you think, from a CISO's perspective, raises to the level of importance that you should be working on a regular basis?
I've said this in a couple of different places, but I do believe security is paramount, I think, in a company, especially where we're at here at MoonPay, and making sure that we protect our platforms and our customers in the same way. But you have to cultivate a security, in my opinion. You have to cultivate a security first culture. Security is always seen as a blocker. No matter what you try to do, it's always going to be seen as a blocker. But if you cultivate it the proper way and you help to share what your vision is for security, how you're going to lay it out, what you're going to do, is very important. So when you think about talent and those things, understanding that you're coming into a secure workspace, that you understand that while we want to innovate and we're going to move fast, we're going to do it securely. So understanding those things and making sure that that message is heard is important. So as you're building those relationships, it's continual across the board on how you onboard new employees and explain how IT works or explain how your security systems work is important. Literally just this last week, I led a security onboarding session for a group that was coming in because there were questions. And I told them on there, we won't hide anything from you about how we operate. I want you to know about it. I think the more you know about it, the better off it's going to be. There's no secrets to be held. We're here to protect. We're here to enable. We're here to help you move faster. We will do what we have to do, but we'll also do it in such a way that if something isn't right, we'll reach out. We will talk. We will only take really drastic action when it's in the best interest of something at the company, because it's we should do. But having a layer where there's a layer of trust built into it that we're here to help, not just merely protect, I think is very important. So same thing goes with when you look at your talent team. If you're going to bring those new hires coming in, sharing the vision with them, sharing the culture with them of what we have and how security operates, really, I believe, will help set a really positive tone in the long term. So it's really important to ensure that you are able to share that horizontally, not just once and you're done. It needs to be continuous. It has to be talked about more and more on a daily basis.
We have time for one last question, and it's the most important question of the whole podcast. Here's the question. We've talked about a lot, but we have a hard time remembering everything as humans. Like, there's only so much we can keep up here. If there was one important takeaway that you wanted the audience of HR and talent professionals to take away from this podcast with you, what would that one thing be?
Maybe it's probably not a hidden thing or out there, but I would say that, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier when we were talking, but trust the hiring manager that's on the other side of the table. Things are not always going to be in the resume. They're not going to be in the interview. Some of it's going to be when you're in that process and you can feel the person you're talking to. I have hired people into even the organization now that were on a journey to be something that they wanted to be, but you can see the passion under the conversation. It wasn't just the firsthand knowledge to something. They had it, but there was also a passion to want to do more. They were going to push. I just had a conversation with one of my employees a few weeks ago and told them they jumped before they looked, but they jumped for the reason that they wanted to help. And I told them, I can teach you tech all the time. I can teach you how to do something, where to go do the right thing, what to go look in the right log. I can't teach to leap without knowing where you're going, but you want to help. I wouldn't tell the HR team how to hire a talent person because I wouldn't even know where to start with it. There's something that in my seat that you see it, because whether you see yourself on the other end of that or you've seen that happen before. So I would say to them is trust the person has tell you, I can feel it. I can see it in that person. It's not in the resume. It's something beyond the resume. It's beyond the questions that were in it, but you know it's there because they have that energy that's there that's beyond just the basics of what goes through the talent process. That feeling and that intuition that comes from the hiring manager is, I think, a very palatable and very powerful point. So make sure you resonate to that, that you understand that if they come back and say, I see something with them, I know they're going to do so good for what we want. And I can't build that, but it's going to come with them just because the energy that comes with them. I think it's something that you, as a talent person, is trying to say is trust that gut feeling that comes back from the manager, because there's something that we will see that probably goes further than just the resume.
I love it. I wish we had like an hour and a half to talk, but here's what I do know. People are going to have questions. Is it okay if I give out a link to your LinkedIn profile? If people have questions, they can reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Well, fantastic. The mission of this podcast is to bring different points of view around hiring and creating high performance teams and linking that to the performance of the business. And so it's really important that we talk to HR professionals, but it's really important that we talk to leaders all throughout the organization. And if we do that, that collectively is the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I just think you were a really important part of the rising tide today, Doug. And I just want to say thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.